to this week's welcome to this week's episode of the AI debate. I'm Justin Collery. I'm here with Frank Prendergast, and we're here to talk about the issues around AI. Frank, it's been a great week in AI.
Yeah, it has. Well, it's been another crazy week for sure. I like how you said this is the AI debate, which makes it sound very civilized compared to the AI argument.
Where I've got my pen ready. So it feels to me like this has been a pretty busy week. I mean, a couple of weeks ago we got Gemini released from Google. This week we got Claude 3 released from Anthropic. The whole internet, it seems, is waiting for what OpenAI are going to do in response. And it feels like, you know that feeling when you're in a plane and you're at the end of the runway and the pilots just put the engines up to max and you can feel the rumble in the bum and, you know, the bit of the pressure just at the back of your seat and things are just starting to pick up speed. That's how it feels to me this week. It feels like things are picking up pace. How did you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I've had a busy week, and I have felt like this week has been one of those weeks when I've just felt like I can't even keep up with what's going on in AI. And a lot of it seems to be, as well as I think the product side heating up, there's a lot of kind of legal stuff, arguments, battles, you know, the reports about like trust eroding in AI, and there's a lot of like surrounding stuff as well as just the products and the releases and what's going on there. There's a kind of a lot of, yeah, I guess social stuff going on around AI as well.
And what were those trust issues that you saw that you were concerned about?
So there was an Edelman report that said, was it like, I think only 25% of people had any kind of level of trust in AI, was it? It was a very, I will admit, I read the report, I read the blog post. I did not go and read the full report. Definitely on my list to do, but again, in that whole thing of like, wow, how do you keep up with everything? I haven't dug in yet. So it seemed like a very broad thing, like trust in AI. I don't know what that means even, but just as an indicator of what the public is feeling, the public do not seem to be too enthralled with AI and the way that it's being handled and the way it's being rolled out and the companies who are in charge of it.
Do you have a sense of why that might be?
Because it might kill us all, Justin. Well, I mean, I have a sense of why that might be. I do, but I think, you know, it's because people, I think because AI itself is eroding trust in everything. Like people are starting to realize now that we don't know what to believe because of AI. And so I think it stands to reason that would start to permeate the level of trust that people have in the technology in general. I'm just talking here. I don't actually know. I will read the report at some point and come back with a more informed view. But I do think it stands to reason that if we're starting to come to a point where, like, hang on, we can't trust anything now. How can we trust the source of all this material?
It's funny, because I think that's a reason why we should move faster. I think there's a couple of good reasons as to why we should actually roll the technology out faster. So, I mean, one of the things that we really want to do when it comes to AI is, one of the things that I find personally exciting is personal agents. So we can have Frank Prendergast, the person, but we could also each have 100, you know, Justin Collery agents or Frank Prendergast agents, you know, or whatever it might be. And they're sort of there and they bend to our will. So when you read a report like this, or you see, you know, an image which you think is not, you know, real or whatever. I mean, I have this image that what we'll do is we'll talk to our phone or one of our agents and say, here, look, I saw this picture of Frank Prendergast and he dyed his hair purple. Is that real or is it not real? And then the agents, because that's one of the big sort of use cases of AI is that you have these agents. That's really where it's I think both personally and business wise. And so you use those agents to be able to filter the internet. And there's a lot of discussion around, I mean, you're right in terms of, you know, deep fakes and stuff like that, but also it's impossible to create an AI system that isn't biased in some way, right? We know that it's going to be biased, right? It's just impossible, right? There are facts, and then after that, there's politics and opinions, and that's how the world is.
Yeah.
And so you can't change the model, the base model, right? They're always going to have, you know, some bias one way or the other, but we can change how we interface with those models and how we decide what's real or what's not real. And so from my point of view, I think, you know, the faster the technology gets developed, the quicker we get access to agents, which can then help us to figure out what's real and what's not real.
Can they, though? Because right now, certainly they cannot. I mean, we do not have a way of detecting AI generated content. So even if we take a simple example of images, all of the text to image generators are currently working on ways to detect AI generated images, but they're not working on how to detect AI generated images at large. They're each figuring out, how do we detect images that were created with our own tool? And there is no kind of overall what's an AI image. And so we are reliant on, right now, we're reliant on the companies who are developing the tools identifying their own images. And that's just the large companies who have some level of, you know, responsible AI development baked into what they believe. It doesn't account at all for, you know, the open source models, the models that are out there that have no guardrails and no kind of, I suppose, social responsibility baked into them. So right now, like, even if we had a highly intelligent agent and we said, okay, is this AI generated? There isn't actually a way for it to tell. I mean, it could come back and tell us, you know, well, I think because this guy has 6 fingers, it's probably AI. But
that's not. I mean, that's not how my agent. Your agent might look at it like that. But my agent, what I would hope it would do is it would go look. So I've heard a story that Frank's dyed his hair pink, and so what it would go is it would go, and the agent is pretty smart, and what it will do is it'll go scour the internet for pictures, and it'll say, oh, so I see a picture here. Frank has got his hair dyed pink. It was taken on the 18th of March. You know, here's the context. I'll go and search for other pictures from the same event. Oh, I found 5 other pictures from the same event, and Frank doesn't have his hair dyed pink in any of those pictures. Therefore, I've corroborated. You know, that's normally how, in all of these things, you have to think, well, how would a human do it? Right. And the AI will replicate how a human would do it. So you cross-check, you find 2 sources, you know, look for other sources of information to corroborate whether it's right or wrong. And it's not going to kill us, Frank.
That's okay. So that is an interesting and fair point. But let's look at it from another perspective, which is, let's say that was possible. That still requires you to say, is this real? And right now, so there was a really interesting report about Donald Trump supporters generating images of Donald Trump with happy Black voters. And he's standing there with his arms around them, and etc. And they're fake. And a lot of them are obviously fake. That's fine. You can count the fingers and be like, yeah, okay, that's AI. But the problem is, first you have to stop and count the fingers. First you have to question it. And my issue is, when it gets down to that level of subtlety, you're not even going to stop. So you're scrolling, but you're seeing 10 images of Donald Trump with Black voters who appear to be supporting him. You're not thinking about it. You're not questioning it. You're not even reading the post, but you're being repeatedly exposed to these images, which has a psychological effect. So I think that there are really, you know, if you see a picture of the Pope doing coke at a frat party, you're going to question it. You're going to be like, wow, what? Did he? Oh my God. But I remember last year in the UK, what really grabbed politicians' attention was not some outrageous picture of a politician like that. It was a photograph which was doctored of the Prime Minister. The original photograph he had pulled, he was at a festival, he was looking very pleased with himself, he had pulled this perfect pint, he was handing it to a punter, and the woman who actually owned the bar stand or whatever was looking very pleased in the background as well. The photograph was doctored so that it was now a horrendously poured pint, and the woman in the background was kind of looking at him skeptically. That's what grabbed their attention, because suddenly they realized, oh, hang on, it's not about some like crazy picture of the Prime Minister doing something that, you know, people probably wouldn't believe anyway. it's the constant erosion of trust through little subtle things that possibly nobody would ever question.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. To a point, I agree with you. And I don't. I mean, I know that there are technical ways to identify what's been. The big companies are working on ways where you would have, let's say, a hash value for, an image that's been generated or altered, and they will all store the hash values, and then you can check and you can watermark them and stuff. But it's really hard, and there's ways around it and whatever. And it is the societal impact of those things. But I would put it to you that we've been dealing with the societal impact, for instance, of social media and young girls and all these sort of things, which also cause
Yes.
issues. And I'm a parent, right, of a young girl, and you just have to as a parent, you got to deal with it, right? You've got to change the way that you interface with technology, or you think about technology. It's a danger that you have to become aware of. But I agree with you, actually. I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of skeptical, and I look at something and question it. But if you turn around to, an 18-year-old kid who's just got the vote and looks at images on TikTok, are they going to be questioning enough to be able to say, is that really, is that a real picture or is it not a real picture?
Yeah.
Maybe they're smarter than we are. Maybe they are, but I don't know. But it's not going to lead to the end of the world.
I mean, no, it's not, but it is. I mean, it is potentially highly damaging. And, you're right. We have already been dealing with this. So in a way, it's a compounding effect, because social media, I mean, Facebook there have been investigations into Facebook on the effects of like young people, and the fact that they were aware that it had all these negative effects, but they were brushing them under the carpet. And now we have a compounding effect where, like, yes, this has been the case for some time, and now people are going to be able to propagate horrendous materials, completely fake, subtly at scale. So I do think, yeah, it's not going to kill us all, but there are definitely major impacts. I mean, everyone is concerned about the election, the US election this year. So that's the kind of thing I think that could really subtly impact. I mean, if someone was able to do a Cambridge Analytica style campaign with really subtly opinion changing torrents of AI imagery and video and voice, it could have a significant impact.
Interestingly, because I mean, Cambridge Analytica actually is a brilliant example. I mean, how many years is it since Cambridge Analytica was doing what Cambridge Analytica do? It must be 8 years. Is it 2 elections ago? I'm thinking it must be.
My sense of time is horrendous, but it was a while back. Yeah,
it's a while back, right? So, to your point, actually, I find this fascinating. You have to assume that that's going on. Like, it's not just if somebody does this, you would have to say that they will absolutely do it. I mean, Trump himself already released, I don't know, he released a video on Instagram, which was hilarious yesterday, but it was basically all the filters from Snapchat with Joe Biden, and it was funny. Right? It was funny. But there's, I think it's, what do you call it? The CPACs, or the special interest groups that, aren't related, but are related to the candidates, and they have a lot of money behind them. And there's no rules for those people. They can do anything at all. And that is, I mean, I'll grant you that's a risk. I'll give you that one, Frank, but I'm not worried about it.
when you say you're not worried, so when you say you're not worried about it, how do you mean?
Well, I think the benefits, so people are always going to take technology and use it for something that is bad or dangerous or whatever. This is my usual thing, which is when cars were invented, there was a person out the front with a red flag, because they were afraid that the cars were going to run over the horses. That would be terrible, right? So let's talk in a very similar thing, right, to deepfakes. Let's talk a little bit more about Sora. So this was the video software and I'm going to give you some nerdy facts just for 2 or 3 minutes, right?
Cool. Okay, great.
So we had Sora. Sora, I mean, the videos are amazing, and they're photorealistic to a point, right? They're not quite 100% photorealistic, but they're really close. Like, they're amazing. And what I would look is, if you look at this thing called the context window, which is the amount of text or information that you can send into your AI. So if you look 12 months ago to the context window size of GPT-4, it was like 4,000 tokens, 8,000 tokens, 16,000 tokens, that sort of size. Fast forward to now, today, and you have Google Gemini, and it has a context window length of 1 million or 1.5 million tokens. So what we're looking at here is, you know, how quickly the technology progresses. Now, if you do the same for Sora, so, you know, maybe 6 or 8 months back, you know, you could make a couple of seconds. You could make a video a couple of seconds. And now Sora has brought that up to be about 60 seconds. So you can make a video of 60 seconds. But Frank, it will not surprise you to know that I've done the math. And if the technology continues at this rate, by this time next year, you'll be able to make a full-length movie just using Sora. And you know better than I do, that's not how movies are made anyway. They're of, you know, distinct little, you know, 5 or 10 minute segments or whatever it happens to be. So I think that the same technology which you're worried about also has potentially enormous beneficial effects for artists, for people who write books. I mean, I read books. There's an Irish author called Derek Landy. He writes a book called Skullduggery Pleasant. The best, funniest books I've ever read. Fantastic. He signed a movie deal and it never happened. The movies never got made, right? Which is a terrible, because the books are clearly written to be made into a movie. But I can imagine in 12 months, you could take those books and you could feed them into a large language model and it would make the movie for you. Now, Derek Landy is the winner there, because he no longer needs to have a movie studio and give half the money to them. You know, he doesn't have to pay all these actors. I think, in fact, that, and who needs actors at the end of the day?
The actors are going to be thrilled.
I mean, well, I think this.
I'm an actor. You know, I'm an actor. I'm an actor as well.
I know, Frank.
so it does. Yeah, it does start to get very interesting. I think. Yeah.
I think it's an upside I think it's an upside for every actor except for the big Hollywood actors. Because if you think of a distribution graph of who makes money from acting, you've got a small number of people in Hollywood who make hundreds of millions of dollars, and then you've got hundreds of millions of actors that make dollars. You know, it sort of switches one way or the other. And so where I see what's happening here is you have content creators, writers, and it cuts out the middleman between the writer and the consumer of what they've written, and it gives you new ways to enjoy their content. And in the AI future that I would see, then, I mean, what you would have is traveling companies and people going to see plays, because it's a human thing, not a computer thing. It actually increases in value, and people, you know, you're sort of, it's a thing that people will enjoy imperfection more in a world where everything is perfect. And so what it does is it democratizes acting and it democratizes content creation.
I mean, I hope you're right in terms of the human connection. I believe that there will, yes, just as you say, we will always want to connect with art that was created by another human, because it's the shared human experience that we're connecting with. I mean, I love AI art. And I classify it as art. I don't see how it's not art. I think it is creative. I think it's art. But I'm always going to respect the blood, sweat, and tears that went into somebody actually spending so much time painting. And I think, you know, I think painting is a good example of why I think you're right, and why I think we will continue to appreciate human art, because there's no real reason for us to be oil painting anymore. Like, why not do it in Photoshop, or why not take a photograph? But we still have, you know, we still appreciate oil paintings. We still go to exhibitions. We still hang them on our wall, and artists still paint in oils. Yeah, and there was, you know, for another example, I think there was someone, was it Rick Rubin, was talking about how AI would never be able to create a song like Love Will Tear Us Apart. And I think he's wrong. I think it will be able to create a song like Love Will Tear Us Apart. But I still think that we will appreciate the human who has done it, because we will know the hours and the human torment in their life that drove them to write that song. So I hope you're right on those counts, but it still creates an economic issue. Like, AI can't take our creativity. We can continue to be creative. We can continue to appreciate creativity. The question is anybody going to pay us for it? is the record label going to pay somebody to spend months crafting a song when AI could do it in 2 seconds? Are the studios, is anybody going to pay, you know, is there going to be a scale of an audience for actors to do their thing when people could just come home at the end of a busy day, turn on Streamberry, to quote the Black Mirror streaming service, turn on Streamberry and just see the film that has been made for them, tailor-made for their mood and the day that they've had? Is anybody going to pay an actor to do something similar?
Yeah, I think it's the social element, Frank, though. I mean, you can't go and watch an AI performer in the 3 Arena or the Giant Stadium or whatever it happens to be.
Haven't they done that with Elvis?
Well, it's not the same, you know. I think it's not quite the same. And it's funny because I talk to my kids about, I say to them, look at, you know, the jobs that exist today, they're just not going to exist. I don't know that they'll exist in 5 years. They certainly won't exist in 10 years. And so the best advice I can give to you is just to do whatever it is you enjoy. Just do that and go forward. But having said that, given that, you know, that I say that, you know, it's really I would say probable that in 10 years from now, if AI doesn't do all the productive labor in the economy, it'll be very obvious that it will do it very shortly afterwards. So what do you do? Like, what do you do in that sort of a world? And their first response is, I'll become a sports star. And I think that goes to the heart of the truth of it, which is it's that human connection. If you want to go and watch a match, or if you want to go and watch a concert, or you want to go and watch a play, well, then people will still pay for that. And the people that are losers are the studios. They're the movie studios, or they're the record producing companies, the people that everybody hated anyway at the start. So I like getting rid of lawyers. I like
your vision of the future. I think it's one possible outcome, but I would have concerns that that's not where we actually end up, because will it push us more to engage with live performances, etc.? I don't know. It would be nice to think it did. However, like, again, it's a bit like the Hollywood comparison you made. Like, Taylor Swift will bring in a huge crowd right now, but smaller artists are finding it increasingly difficult, as far as I can understand, to like get people to venues and, you know, to live events. Cinemas have been struggling, or certainly they were up until Barbenheimer, but I think Barbenheimer was a kind of a little blip, but in general I think they're struggling. So people right now, certainly people are getting very comfortable with consuming things in their home, and will they just continue to do so, and will they just continue to be happy to consume what is put in front of them? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm saying I literally do not know, but I do think it's an issue that we have to be cognizant of. And I think it all comes back to that thing that we've talked about before about, yes, if AI takes over that kind of economic layer of society, which I think would be fantastic, as long as humans have some way to continue to thrive, and not just Sam Altman and Jeff Bezos and
well, can we talk for just 2 minutes about Sam Altman and Jeff Bezos and what's been going on? Because one of the really interesting things that happened this week, last week we discussed that Elon Musk was suing OpenAI, saying that it was supposed to be open. The software was supposed to be open source. And that, you know, it was supposed to be a charity, basically. And he had invested in a charity, and it had turned it into a for-profit company, and this was a breach of contract. And in response, I don't know if you've read this, but in response, OpenAI have released a statement and a number of emails between Elon Musk and Sam Altman and Ilya Stutzker going back as far as 2016. I don't know if you've seen those emails.
No, I haven't.
Well, a couple of things from this jump out. So basically what's happening is Ilya Stutzker, one of the founders of OpenAI, was, you know, emailing Elon Musk saying, well, here, look, as the technology develops, it's okay for us to not release the science. He said, in fact, it will be dangerous for us to do it. As time goes on, we must become more closed and not more open. They also discuss in these emails that it's going to take a lot of money to develop this technology. And I think we know how much money now. It's $7 trillion, according to Sam Altman, because that's how much money he's trying to risk. And that they were going to need, Elon Musk back in 2016 was trying to raise $1 billion to fund OpenAI, but he wanted full control in order to give them the money.
Yeah.
And actually what he said, it was totally fine for it to be a profit company. And he said it was totally fine in the emails for it not to release the science. So what this totally looks like is a bun fight. Elon Musk wanted OpenAI to have full control of OpenAI. And when he didn't get it, and now OpenAI are about to really make meaningful progress towards AGI, he's suing them just to slow them down. It's sour grapes is what's actually happening with Elon Musk. It's very interesting. And the other person that I noticed this week that has sour grapes, I think, a little bit is Yann LeCun, who I have huge respect for. He's the head of AI in Meta. I mean, he's one of the fathers of AI, and he's a brilliant scientist. But in one respect, he says we're at least 10 years away from AGI. And part of me wonders, is he saying that we're 10 years away from AGI because he's 10 years away from AGI? And is that his ego rather than the scientist talking? And it's another reason that I think that we'll never get as far as AGI. AGI, interestingly, in Elon Musk's lawsuit, he quotes, what's that? Tomorrow, Annie, the musical. AGI AGI is like Annie the musical. It's tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes.
Right.
So it's fascinating, but it seems to me this is a room full of big egos. Big egos.
Well, yeah. And it is, like, it's fascinating to me that we are where we are and nobody really fully understands it. And that, I mean, to me, I think that's what I was saying last week about, like, this concerns me in terms of if the people at the very forefront don't fully understand, but think that there is some level of threat. But even if we take the threat out of it, even if we just look at AGI, so like my understanding is Yann LeCun, he does not believe that AGI is achievable through LLMs. But then
Correct.
On the other side of that, we now have people saying, like, so we have Anthropic saying that Claude is exhibiting what exactly did they say about Claude?
Signs. No, Anthropic didn't say it themselves, but people using Anthropic said that it demonstrated signs of sentience. So they asked it to, let's say, paint pictures of what it's like for it to think. Now, I don't think it shows any signs of sentience at all, but and I think it's brilliant.
They did say something that that people latched onto. Maybe it was something more about human level intelligence rather than sentience. I'm not sure, but there was something in their release that people latched onto that was in this area that they were saying we were getting closer. And it's not even new, because I mean, there was that Google employee. I have forgotten his name, but he quit Google and he said, "I'm quitting because this is sentient." We have people like I think even
Microsoft employee this week who was getting traumatized because of the images that the Microsoft. What prompt he was doing this? Can we just talk about this? Because this guy, right? This guy was a Microsoft employee. And he said he was getting traumatized by the images that the Microsoft AI was making. But he said, okay, one, what prompt was he using? I mean, what was he asking it to do? And two, he was doing it on his spare time. He wasn't supposed to be using the thing in the first place. This guy is...
How is that relevant? What does that matter?
Well, I'm not going to go poking a nail into my finger in my spare time if I don't have to.
No,
I'm not going to be sticking things...
But if your children are exposed to horrific images, is your response going to be, "But you weren't meant to be on that. You weren't meant to be on."
Microsoft. I do that all the time. If they burn themselves in the fire, it's like, well, don't be sticking your finger in the fire. Then it's really easy.
But he did release some of his prompts. Now, I don't have access to Microsoft Copilot, but what I didn't fully understand was Microsoft Copilot is using OpenAI technology.
Yes.
So presumably that's DALL-E 3.
Correct, it is. Yeah.
Does the Microsoft Copilot have completely different guardrails than to DALL-E 3 within, say, ChatGPT, because you can't get anything remotely like what he was describing through ChatGPT.
And I can tell you from my knowledge of Copilot and how the Microsoft ecosystem is set up, they've got filters, content filters on that as well, to stop you also. So you've got 2 layers, as far as I can see, of content filters. And I would be concerned.
Understand how he was doing that.
But as a Microsoft employee, he might be behind the content filters, and therefore has, you know, if it's a test system, who knows, he might have access to it.
And this is kind of interesting, because like these stories, you know, these stories come out and we don't have the full picture. And, you know, so we talked last week about Gemini, and we talked about how Gemini, people are saying that it was too woke because it was creating images that if you asked for Nazis, it would give you a diverse group of Nazis and things like that. And also we talked about how it was denying that the events of October the 7th, the Hamas attack, denying that that was real, things like that. And now it's coming out that that all could be because of White House interference in terms of the guardrails or the pre-prompts that are, or possibly even the training. So you pointed out to me that
Congress want to know what happened here exactly, and I don't know that the White House. I don't know that there's any political interference, but what I do think is right that's happened. Congress have asked for an explanation from Google as to how did this happen, what training data was used, why is it that this happened.
But apparently it's because they heard from an employee that Joe Biden's administration had insisted that there should be equality baked, or not. It wasn't equality. Equality was not the word, but essentially that there should be equality baked into the system, and so they clearly just got that wrong. Like, I can understand that this was a positive. I can understand this was a well-meaning intention, but they clearly got the training or the prompting wrong. They got the guardrails wrong, and so it is going beyond what it's meant to do. And it's not just presenting balanced perspectives. It's going too far, let's say, on the left-leaning side.
And that's the way of the world, right? Technology always works like that, and you know, it's a very Californian mindset that what you do is you release quickly, you find your issues, you fix them, and you move ahead. And when we talk about, so, you know, my background is in software, right? And, you know, you try and release your products as perfect, but you know they're not going to be perfect. And you take a risk every time you release a product. And Google messed up, right? The guys who are supposed to test it didn't test it right. But that's okay, right? You fix it and you move on.
Is it okay?
Yes,
I mean, they're the only ones so far. I mean, they're the only ones who've messed up this badly, surely. And it's Google. They should know better.
Microsoft messed up with before they got into bed with OpenAI. They had their own AI system. It was racist, and it was the other way. It was just horrible. OpenAI got into trouble when they were doing their red testing, which is when they give it to a small group of people to do the testing. They got into trouble. It was quite, extreme as well. But
that's the bigger thing, with OpenAI, we know that OpenAI have, like Sam Altman has even said, that they have developed products that they have not released because they realized in the red teaming stages that they were too dangerous. And so, yes, we know that OpenAI have, even we know that like ChatGPT or DALL-E, like DALL-E 3 is capable of doing all the stuff that Microsoft employee said, but the guardrails are put in place to try to prevent it from actually reaching the public. And that's, I assume, because of the level of testing and red teaming that OpenAI do, and Google just seem to have completely messed that up. And I suspect it's because they're playing catch up and they're trying to race to get stuff out there, and they're not doing their due diligence, which I think is more important, should be more important with something like AI than getting the product out there quickly.
It's actually really hard. I can tell you, my first job in the software industry was as a tester. And, you would lock everything down, you'd come up with all the scenarios, you'd run the scenarios and you'd test it. But with an AI, the problem space, the problem surface is so huge, it's impossible, to test it. It just is. And actually, I worry about, I know you saw today or this week that Apple has dropped their plans to release a car, and now they're going to focus on Gen AI. And one of the things I worry about Apple is exactly the point that you're making. Apple products are just beautiful. I mean, I have a phone, I have the watch, I have a second watch, so I get twice the credit when I go for a walk. I've got all the Apple products. I love the company. It's brilliant. But one of the things that defines Apple and their products is that when they release products, they're perfect. They're beautiful in every way, and they've been tested. And they failed with the car because they couldn't do it. And with LLMs, I worry they're going to focus on that now, and it's impossible to create out of the blocks the perfect LLM. And I think you do need the interaction. It needs to meet reality in order to find the rough edges, and then you shave the rough edges. And I would say that I'm heartened. The one thing I'm heartened by is the way the Congress is looking into this, because in a way, politics and society has to become a bit like a software company. And so it has to wait for, an issue to appear, and then it's got to do something, react. So Gemini, Google released this. They got to say, well, what happened there, right? If there's a deep fake issue, you got to do something about it. We spoke last week about the fake phone calls. They banned those. And they're going to have to be much more nimble and agile in order to tackle the problems of technology, which is moving much faster.
I agree. I think it's fantastic that that it is being looked into, and that we might, fingers crossed, get some transparency around what the issue was, because I think, again, with something like AI, the public deserves to know, like, why did this go so wrong? The thing that I'd be concerned about with that approach in general is that we will just be swamped with so many issues to address that it just won't be possible. And governments they're not generally speaking the most nimble or fast to act. We've gone way over time, and I'd actually love to just stay here and continue chatting through this and arguing all day. But I guess we should probably wrap it up. I think it's a good point to wrap it up. I think we both agree that it is fantastic that there is some level of accountability starting to appear now. And yeah, for me, the question is just, will we be able to keep up if we have to keep holding these companies accountable and they're not necessarily doing enough due diligence first?
Frank, look, I just enjoy the Frighten Frank Fridays.
Yeah, maybe we should. The AI argument is a good name, but Frighten Frank Fridays might be something that we change the brand to.
Look, it'll all be fine. I don't see anything. When an issue arises, I'll be right on top of it, Frank. Everything's
excellent. Good. Justin to the rescue. I love it.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. I will chat to you again.
Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
Cheers, Justin.
Bye.